It might actually be spiritual malpractice. I was in elementary school when Hal Lindsey's The Late Great Planet Earth was published. Shortly after, the Christian horror movie Thief in the Night was released. And the end times teaching on the pre-tribulation rapture of the church became mainstream, almost orthodox in some circles. I simply accepted it as true. But then a few years later, I read the Bible. When I read the Bible through from cover to cover at the age of 14, I realized that this particular teaching wasn't as obvious or as unassailable as many thought and taught. In case you don't know what I'm talking about, let me explain. The pre-tribulation rapture is the belief that Christians will be taken up to heaven before a period of tribulation on the earth. It's often associated with premillennialism, the idea that following this tribulation, Jesus comes back and establishes his kingdom on earth for 1,000 years. I'm not going to unpack all the various views here, but if you want to do some good research after reading the Bible, you might want to check out this book here, Contemporary Options in Eschatology by Millard Erickson, and there are others as well. My thesis here is that teaching the pre-tribulation rapture as an end times certainty is dangerous and counterproductive to disciple making, as well as our individual spiritual well-being. Here's my biggest concern. In the parable of the sower, Jesus speaks of the seed falling on rocky ground. It refers to someone who hears the word and at once receives it with joy. But since they have no root, they last only a short time. When trouble or persecution comes because of the word, they quickly fall away. In Matthew 24, Jesus says, "You'll be handed over and persecuted, put to death. You'll be hated by all nations because of me. At that time, many will turn away from the faith and will betray and hate each other. Many false prophets will appear and deceive many people. Because of the increase of wickedness, the love of most will grow cold. But the one who stands firm to the end will be saved." Other passages also reference a falling away or an apostasy at the time of the end. 1 Timothy 4:1. The Spirit clearly says that in later times, some will abandon the faith and follow deceiving spirits and things taught by demons. 2 Thessalonians 2:3 speaks of an apostasy, a rebellion or falling away that takes place near the time of the end. Now, imagine the thousands of Christians who believe that the pre-tribulation rapture is a certainty. And then the tribulation happens, or then just general persecution happens. What's described in the parable of the sower would happen on a mass scale. Since they have no root, they last only a short time. When trouble or persecution comes because of the word, they quickly fall away. Given the fact that such a falling away near the time of the end is prophesied by Jesus, might it not be possible that a big contributor to this falling away is a belief that we are going to bypass extreme persecution? And then when the persecution hits, people fall away? I think so. Despite the fact that Christians have suffered persecution in many times and places throughout history, the Western Christian church, in its relative freedom and prosperity, doesn't seem to entertain the possibility, at least not very much. Making disciples requires that we prepare Christians for opposition and marginalization and even persecution. An exclusive end times teaching on the pre-tribulation rapture tends to eliminate that kind of preparation. And that's why my biggest concern about teaching a pre-trib rapture exclusively is that it sets believers up for a fall. But I have some other concerns as well. Exclusive teaching on the pre-trib rapture interferes with evangelism. We once served in a church that was a hotbed of a very specific end times teaching, including the pre-tribulation rapture. And a significant number of people in that church had become very inward focused, withdrawn from society, and were simply hanging on until Jesus came back. One of these couples was neighbors with one of my wife's co-workers. This co-worker liked this Christian couple. They socialized a bit back and forth. But then one day, this Christian couple told this unsaved neighbor they were no longer going to associate with them because they didn't have enough in common. It's a true story. A non-Christian liked spending time with these Christians, but these Christians cut them off. And the reason they cut them off was tied to their end times views and the idea that they needed to hunker down and get ready for the rapture. Christians fixated on an imminent rapture often withdraw from broader societal engagement. they become isolated. And this limits opportunities to build relationships and share the gospel with those outside the church. One other concern. The interest in sensationalized end times teaching displaces other important biblical teaching. The interest in sensationalism around this topic tempts pastors and Christian personalities to become dogmatic and stray from the clear teaching of Scripture. This, of course, can lead to division and sectarianism, but also leads to discredit of Christian leaders and entire organizations when they try to connect every current event with some proof text to support their stance. If you follow some of these teachers over time, the way they shoehorn major current events into their frameworks is simply ridiculous. Some have even gone so far as to set dates. Yes, such teaching gets clicks online, gets big attendance at some very big churches. It sells a lot of books, it draws a lot of donations from far and wide, but it has little positive effect on the lives of individual Christians or the communities in which they live. There are too many end times junkies with no discernible evangelistic or disciple-making activity in their lives. Don't be that kind of Christian.